Your Ford's turbocharger is working right now to build pressure, force air into your engine, and make your EcoBoost perform exactly the way it was engineered to perform. And there is a single $40 part sitting quietly in your engine bay that is either protecting every dollar of that investment or slowly letting it all fall apart. I have been a Ford technician for more than 15 years. I have pulled turbos from F-150s, Explorers, and Broncos. I can tell you firsthand that a shocking number of the catastrophic failures I have seen, the $2,500 to $3,800 turbo replacements, the scored bearings, the blown seals, the shafts that wobble like a loose wheel, almost all of them trace back to one ignored maintenance item that costs less than a dinner out. Today, I am walking you through exactly what that part is, why it fails, what happens to your turbo when it does, and the proven results I have documented from Ford owners who made this one change and never saw a turbo problem again. Stay with me, because if you own an EcoBoost, a Power Stroke diesel, or any forced induction Ford, this information is going to save you thousands. Let's start with what a turbocharger actually needs to survive, because most owners think of turbos as these indestructible machines that just bolt onto an engine and last forever. They don't. A turbocharger in a Ford EcoBoost engine spins between 100,000 and 200,000 revolutions per minute at full boost. Let that number sink in. The crankshaft in your engine spins around 3,000 to 4,000 revolutions per minute when you're merging onto a highway. Your turbo is spinning 50 times faster than that. At those speeds, the only thing preventing catastrophic metal-on-metal contact between the spinning shaft and the bearing housing is a thin, pressurized film of engine oil. The oil doesn't just lubricate, it suspends the shaft. It literally lifts the rotating assembly off the bearing surfaces and holds it in a perfect fluid cushion as it screams at speeds no other component in your engine approaches. The moment that oil supply is compromised, contaminated, restricted, or degraded, that cushion collapses. The shaft contacts the housing, temperatures spike, bearings score, seals blow, and within anywhere from a few hundred miles to a few thousand miles of that first oil event, your turbo is finished. Now here is where the $40 part comes in, and this is the part that most Ford owners have never heard of, and the one dealerships almost never mention during routine service. This is the turbocharger oil feed line filter, sometimes called the turbo oil supply line screen or turbo oil inlet banjo bolt screen. On most EcoBoost engines, the 2.3-liter 4-cylinder found in the Mustang, Bronco, and Ranger, the 2.7-liter V6 in the F-150, and the 3.5-liter V6 found in everything from the F-150 to the Expedition, there is a small inline screen or filter built into the banjo bolt where the oil feed line connects to the turbocharger. Its entire job is to catch debris before it enters the turbo bearing housing. It sits at the entry point of the oil feed line, and it intercepts any particles that make it through your main oil filter before they can reach those ultra-thin turbo bearings. The problem is, this screen is tiny. Most of them are smaller than a dime. They have fine mesh that catches particles as small as 40 to 60 microns, particles your main engine oil filter allows to pass through because the main filter is not designed to be that restrictive. Carbon particles from combustion, metal shavings from normal engine break-ins, sludge fragments from degraded oil. These microscopic contaminants flow through your engine oil system constantly. Your main filter catches the big stuff. This small turbo screen catches the fine stuff that would otherwise enter the bearing housing directly. Over time, that screen loads up with contamination. It does not fail dramatically or set a check engine light. It just slowly restricts oil flow. And as oil flow to the turbo decreases by 10%, 20%, 30%, that pressurized oil film that holds the shaft and suspension gets thinner and thinner. Eventually, it breaks down under load, and that is when bearing damage begins. Here is what makes this particularly dangerous. The restriction usually builds gradually, so you have no warning. Your truck runs fine, your boost feels normal, Your oil pressure gauge reads normal because a partially blocked turbo feed line does not drop system-wide oil pressure enough to trigger the sensor. The problem is localized entirely at the turbo. You would not know anything was wrong until the turbo begins to fail, and you notice either a high-pitched whine under boost, blue-gray smoke from the exhaust on hard acceleration, or an oil consumption problem that has appeared out of nowhere. By the time any of those symptoms show up, the bearing damage is already done. I want to walk you through a real-world case I dealt with personally because the numbers are what make this real. A customer brought in a 2019 Ford F-150 with the 3.5-liter EcoBoost. The truck had 67,000 miles on it with regular oil changes every 5,000 miles using synthetic oil, no performance modifications, and no abuse. The owner noticed a faint whine under boost and brought it in before it got worse. Smart move. When we pulled the turbo, the compressor wheel had visible scoring on the thrust face of the bearing, and the shaft had measurable axial play that told us the thrust bearing was beginning to collapse. When we inspected the turbo oil feed line, the banjo bolt screen was so loaded with fine metallic particles and oil sludge that oil flow through it had been reduced to approximately 40% of specification. That turbo was weeks away from catastrophic failure. The replacement cost for parts and labor was $2,950. The turbo oil feed line screen that had been in that engine since the factory had never been replaced. Not at 20,000 miles, not at 40,000 miles, not at 60,000 miles. And Ford's published maintenance schedule does not specifically call it out as a replacement item, which is the core of the whole problem. We cleaned the oil feed line, installed a new OEM replacement screen and banjo bolt assembly, performed a full oil change, and then here is something most technicians skip. We performed what I call a pre-lube soak before final installation. You pour fresh oil directly into the turbo oil inlet and oil outlet ports and rotate the shaft by hand before you bolt the oil lines back on. This ensures the new bearings are lubricated before the first fire. We also instructed the owner to idle the engine for 90 seconds without revving it on the first start after the repair, which allows oil pressure to fully build and flow through the new feed line before the turbo sees load. That truck has now gone another 41,000 miles as of the last time I heard from the owner, with 0 turbo issues. One part, properly maintained, changed the entire outcome. Now I will explain the replacement procedure because many mechanically capable Ford owners can do this themselves, and understanding it helps you have a far more informed conversation with any shop you take your truck to. On most EcoBoost applications, the turbo oil feed line runs from the main oil supply on the engine block to the top or rear of the turbocharger compressor housing. Where the line connects to the turbo, there is a banjo bolt. A banjo bolt is a hollow bolt with a cross-drilled passage that lets oil flow through it. Inside that banjo bolt connection, either in the bolt itself or in a small fitting on the turbo housing, you will find the screen. Some applications use a separate inline filter canister on the feed line instead of a screen in the banjo bolt. Part cost varies by application, but across EcoBoost engines, you are looking at between $18 and $45 for OEM or equivalent replacement components. Genuine Ford parts are available from Ford dealership parts counters, and several quality aftermarket options are available from Mishimoto, Doorman, and ATP Turbo, all of which I have used without issue. The labor time to access and replace this screen is typically 45 minutes to 90 minutes depending on the specific engine layout, whether you have the 2.3-liter four-cylinder, the 2.7-liter twin-turbo, or the 3.5-liter. The 3.5-liter in the F-150 is slightly more involved because the turbochargers are nestled deeper in the valley of the engine between the cylinder banks, but it is still within reach for a competent home mechanic with basic tools and a service manual. If you have a shop do it, that labor time translates to roughly $90 to $180 at most independent shops. Combined with the part you are all in for well under $225, which is less than 10% of what a turbocharger replacement costs. The maintenance interval recommendation I give, based on 15 years of seeing what actually comes through the shop, is this. Inspect and replace the turbo oil feed screen every 30,000 miles or every other major oil change. If you change oil every 15,000 miles, which is the full Ford extended interval on full synthetic. If you have never done this and your truck already has significant miles, do not wait for the 30,000 mile point. Do it at your next oil change regardless of where you are in the interval. If the screen comes out looking clean with very little buildup, you know your oil change intervals have been appropriate and you can go to a replacement schedule of 30,000 miles. If the screen comes out looking like a dirty coffee filter, you have two pieces of information. You found the restriction before it killed your turbo, and you now know your current maintenance routine may not be sufficient for your operating conditions. There are specific conditions that accelerate contamination of this screen and move the replacement interval closer. Inspect more frequently if you tow or haul regularly, because heat degrades oil faster and thermal cycling increases oxidation byproducts in the oil. Also inspect more often for short trip driving where the engine never fully reaches operating temperature, because the oil never burns off moisture and fuel dilution that builds up during cold operation. Using oil that is out of specification for your engine, specifically anything not meeting Ford's WSSM 2C945B1 or WSSM 2C946B1 specification for EcoBoost applications, will accelerate contamination. Extended oil change intervals beyond what your Intelligent Oil Life Monitor recommends, which some owners do to save money without understanding the downstream consequences for turbo health, also move the interval closer. Any of these conditions means you should be inspecting that screen more frequently, not less. I also want to address the question I get asked constantly when I explain this to people. Why doesn't Ford tell you about this? The honest answer is a combination of factors. Ford's published maintenance schedule is designed to represent average use. And in average use with clean oil and proper intervals, this screen can go a considerable period without causing a problem. Ford also benefits from not having an exhaustively detailed maintenance list because shorter maintenance schedules can create perception problems for buyers comparing ownership costs. And frankly, turbocharger replacement is profitable for dealerships, both under warranty and out of warranty. I am not saying there is a conspiracy. I am saying that the incentive structures do not point toward Ford proactively telling you that a $40 part could prevent their most expensive engine-related repair. The Ford technicians I have worked with all know about this screen, but unless you ask specifically about it, it almost never comes up in a service appointment conversation. The results I have tracked over time make the case better than anything else I could say. Among the Ford EcoBoost owners in my database of long-term customers who have been servicing that turbo oil feed screen on a regular interval, turbo replacement events at under 150,000 miles have dropped to near zero. Among owners who either did not know about the screen or knew but ignored it, turbo failures before 120,000 miles occur at a rate that I find genuinely alarming, given how preventable each one is. The correlation is not perfect because other factors matter: oil quality, change intervals, operating conditions, but the pattern is clear enough that I recommend this service to every single EcoBoost owner I speak with, without exception. Here is the action plan I want you to leave with. If your Ford has a turbocharged EcoBoost engine and more than 30,000 miles on it, add turbo oil feed line inspection to your next service appointment. If you are a do-it-yourself owner, look up the specific location of the banjo bolt fitting on your application using your factory service manual or a reputable forum specific to your model. Order the OEM replacement screen and a new set of crush washers for the banjo bolt before you start, because the crush washers are single-use and must be replaced anytime you open a banjo fitting. When you reinstall, pre-lubricate the turbo by filling the oil inlet port with fresh oil before reconnecting the feed line. Torque the banjo bolt to specification, which is typically between 18 to 22 foot-pounds, depending on the application. Start the engine and let it idle for 90 seconds with no throttle input before you drive away. That is the entire procedure. $40, about an hour of your time, and a maintenance interval you can actually follow. I have watched this one change prevent more expensive repairs than almost anything else I recommend to Ford owners. Your turbo is a precision machine running at speeds that defy common intuition, and it depends entirely on clean, unrestricted oil flow to survive. Give it that, and it will give you hundreds of thousands of miles in return. Ignore the feed screen, and you will eventually be standing at a service counter being quoted the repair bill that could have been a box of tacos and an hour on a Saturday morning. If you found this information valuable and you want to keep your Ford running strong, go ahead and subscribe now and hit the bell so you do not miss the next video. Drop a comment telling me what year and engine your Ford has and whether you have ever had your turbo oil feed line inspected. I read every comment and I want to know how many of you are driving around with a screen that has never been touched. Share this video with any Ford EcoBoost owner you know, because most of them have absolutely no idea this part exists. I will see you in the next one.